company covering everything. I'm talking that news you ain't heard of, cause you know it's getting buried. Social justice, yeah, the stuff you need to know about. Fucking politics that the corporate news won't cover. You know they don't think that you could see under, but you can now, cause the people we cover, they may not be famous, but their stories should be heard. Yeah, every voice matters, we should rise and fall together, and that's why.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog at our brand new time. A little bit of an adjustment here, but good morning to you. I am Kerri Barber, here with Progressive Insider and my lovely and talented co-host, Andy Kennedy. Good morning, Andy.
Good morning, Kerri. I must say that you look lovely this morning, especially in that lighting.
It's been a struggle for months, but I actually have 2 new lights, so I am no longer in the shadow. So ta-da! So Tyler, I have to thank you for your lovely critique, along with hundreds of other people who said the lighting was bad. So thank you. Hey, good morning, Azalea. Oh, Azalea said she has to go to work. Well, hopefully we can travel with you this morning, and you can just listen along. So enjoy your work day. Be safe. So yeah, Andy, what's up with you? How was your weekend? Father's Day weekend. Happy belated Father's Day.
It was absolutely wonderful weekend. We are seemingly doing a much better job of coping with the pandemic situation in this country than you are with yours. We had some restrictions lifted from some of our eating / drinking establishments. So my daughter and her friend met my wife and I on Friday afternoon at the local Boston Pizza, where they had the tables set up uh, on the patio and the extended patio, which was part of the parking lot. And so we were able to pass all the protocols and sit at a table for 4 in the sunshine and have a nice drink and a plate of nachos and just enjoy seeing other human beings. It was very nice. The only concern that I had was where our table was, we were in a disabled parking spot. And so I was a little worried that we were going to each get a ticket. But no officer came by to either ticket or tow us. So we were good. And then the rest of the weekend was spent social distancing strategically at people's homes with pools.
That
And
sounds wonderful. So you got to go swimming? It was warm enough?
it's swimming. We were out. We have friends of ours that very, very close friends of ours that have this rather spacious deck, on ground pool area, full wet bar and dining area, fireplace area, and hot tub. That is about the space that most people's homes take up. They live on the street that has now turned it, using that name, to now that we refer to as a resort. And so we had a lovely dinner with friends there, the afternoon and the evening Saturday, and then for Father's Day, my unfortunately my wife was scheduled to work a day shift both days this weekend, but my daughter took me over to another friend's place with a pool for the afternoon, and we sat once again in the sun and swam and listened to loud music and enjoyed our small window of summer. So it
That,
was really nice weekend.
that sounds amazing, actually. I keep threatening my neighbors. They have this it's a beautiful above ground pool, and
Mhm.
it's huge. So my yard sits on a slope. Theirs is flat. So we keep threatening that we're gonna go over there while they're, away, and they're like, yeah, sure, come on. But with school being canceled, everybody's home. So it was a quiet weekend for us. But yeah, so we're in Illinois. we're struggling a little bit with resurgence of COVID. I think we're on step 3 of a step 4 plan to reopen, and it's not going well. So in fact, there was this really handy little chart. I'm gonna put this up real quick here so that people can see where we are right now. So these are just some of the states that part of it here in the United States, because we're inept at handling crisis. A couple weeks of being at home and wearing a mask is apparently too much for some people. So this handy chart shows a really nice breakdown of the states that are still going strong on their phase 1 COVID outbreaks. So there was no dip in it. And you can see a lot of them are southern states. And then you got Utah up there. Kentucky is another one. So Kentucky is using their spike and their lack of leveling for the election tomorrow. So they have limited their polling locations down to just a few. So there's like one polling location in Kentucky that will serve 616,000 registered voters. So what could possibly go wrong? I think Mitch McConnell is very worried about what's going to happen with his election. So they're taking preemptive steps now to prevent people from voting, which is awesome. I say that sarcastically.
Right, and specifically concentrating on persons of color.
Yeah,
From what I
yeah.
understand.
Always in predominantly minority neighborhoods, just like Ohio and other areas do. Chicago did the same thing, so it's not just southern states that are doing it. But here's what was interesting: Oklahoma, the state where Trump had his rally this weekend. They are on a spike right now currently. And then after his rally, we get to see, what the effects are there. So that should be fun. That should be great for everybody, because we all bear the cost of not just, okay, so you cannot put a price on a life. But for those who survive, like, we focus on the death rate, which is horrific and way too high, but then we need to also look at the families that are being treated and the medical expenses that they will incur. Most of these families won't be able to pay those bills. So that comes back to all of us in bad debt write-ups at the end of the year for your state. You're paying for that. So I remember lots of talk about how the testing would be free at the point of service, and how if you needed help with a recovery, you ended up in ICU or whatever, you would not have that cost. Well, that's not bearing out to be true. So,
Right, and that the most of the frontline workers would be rainbow unicorns.
yeah. So Nurse Deb is definitely not a unicorn. She's fabulous, but not a unicorn. So yeah, so this is the reality of what's going on. So all of these things that are happening, it's like people forgot the COVID thing. And I saw that Jimmy Dore had a nice takedown of Fauci. He had a nice takedown of Fauci because Fauci was part of the whole, oh, you don't need to wear a mask. You don't, and he was openly lying about it. As Fauci said, well, we didn't want people rushing out to buy masks that could be used for frontline workers. Well, frontline workers weren't getting them anyway. And
Right.
what you could have done is the same thing they did, years ago, where they told us to get duct tape and plastic to offset a nuclear blast. Stupid, but why not pass along all the instructions on how to make the masks ourselves? So this is where we're at. Yeah, so it's a basic shit show of where we are with COVID and a lot of places. Hawaii actually was doing really well. anybody who was going to Hawaii was in a 14-day quarantine guaranteed. So they flattened that curve almost down to zero, and now they're coming back up too. So
Mm.
so that's nice. So
It's almost like a false sense of security kicks in,
mm,
right? And that people all like that, they think that this is a finite ending. Okay, well, we've beaten it. We're good now. We're just going to go back to the way it was, right?
oh
And
yeah, yeah. Well, because it's not front and center on the news anymore. Now it's protests and police brutality and all of these other things. COVID's taken a back seat, and that's. I think we're relying too much on headlines and not considering everything else that's going on. More than one thing
headlines, you mean
happens.
headlines in terms of neoliberal headlines, capitalist headlines, it's more important to protect property than people headlines, those kind of headlines, you mean?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So all the headlines about looting instead of what is actually happening here. And there was some pushback. Who was it? Joe Rogan got pushback because even he was like, I don't know what the protests are about, but in the course of walking himself through it, he got it. The protests are about systemic racism and the inequality that has been um, perpetrated in this country, particularly for over 100 years. That's why people are protesting. That's why we're talking about defund the police. And my favorite meme about defunding the police as a pushback was, the police crying about, oh, we can't do our jobs if you take our money away. Meanwhile, you have teachers standing over there going, mm-hmm, right? Where were you? We've defunded schools and teachers and everything else for so long, but we still have the expectation that they're going to do their jobs effectively. So,
Hmm. Well, it's all about profit level, right? Like, I mean, we really only want to properly fund things that make money. I mean, that's the whole way that capitalism works, right? You maximize profits. If you can't make a profit, what's the use of doing it?
see, even that doesn't make logical sense because if you're going to put a price tag on a life over the lifetime work, taxes paid, and value added, then that argument itself falls apart, right? So if you have a
Sure.
well-educated population, regardless of ethnicity or circumstance or whatever, when you have that, you all boats rise, right?
Well,
So
of course they do, but the difference is the thinking of short-term profits versus long-term profits, right? Because if you're in charge and the one making the profit, then you want the quick buck now so that you can get the money and leave, right? And be
mhm.
rich and not care about society. Why would I care about other people making money after me, right? Like I've seen interviews where billionaires have said, why should I care about my grandchildren? They're not even born yet,
But yet we expect the
right?
post office to fund benefits for employees who haven't been born yet. So which one is it? So that kind of lends itself to, all right, the Trump rally. We have to talk about it. And what was hilarious to me is overnight a hashtag started trending, and this is White Lives Matter. White Lives Matter. So every time one of those asinine headlines or hashtags starts to trend, and you go and look at it, and it's K-pop. The nice, very nice folks from South Korea who target a hashtag that the alt-right is using to, communicate and voice their whiny ass opinion, then K-pop takes it over. So as of this morning, it has been flooded with K-pop. And they did the same thing with the Trump rally. So you had two groups who aligned. These were our own American folks who were using TikTok
I
to
believe that they're calling themselves the TikTok teens.
yeah, okay, right, right. And some of them, were not teens. They were a little bit older, but what they did was use TikTok to get the message out about reserving tickets. So what ended up happening at the Trump rally, which was beautiful, I thought. So you had all this lead up, the headlines going into the Trump rally and the Juneteenth celebration, and you saw this wonderful education about what was happening about Black Wall Street, and people in this country and in most of the world never learned about what we did to people that were pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and doing things the right way and following the law, and we wiped them out completely. Talk about genocide. So that education was happening, all of this leading up to the rally in Tulsa. And then you saw the actual images, and what actually happened was people were reserving tickets just to make sure that those tickets weren't available. So there were people pushing back saying, well, it was on a first come, first served basis. No, you had to reserve your tickets. So K-pop and TikTok teens went in and scored a number of them. So what you had left was MAGA folks who actually reserved their tickets and then paid people that the Trump campaign, I think it was like 1,000 seats were paid people to be there to kind of fill it in, and then other staffers and people from the campaign itself. So all told, the majority of these people were paid to be there, and then you had this very narrow band of MAGA folks who were there, nobody wearing masks, in this particular arena. So I actually pulled down some video that I want to share here. So if you haven't seen it, it's hilarious. So here we go. So here is the headline of the K-pop stans and TikTok teens. Mother Jones has this wonderful write-up about it, so go check out Mother Jones on this one. I just think it's brilliant. And then this, Andy, you and I were talking about this meme this morning. So Trisha Schroyer posted this one, and it was hilarious. So all those blue seats up there were all the tickets that were reserved that people didn't show up. So if you reserved a seat, it was first come, first served seating, but those other tickets in the blue were the ones that were reserved by K-pop and TikTok teens. And beautiful job, everybody. And it's a nice little snarky meme, to talk about how empty it was. But then the one to top all of this, I think, is this beautiful video that came from the Hill. So I'm going to go ahead and play a little bit of this now. This is Trump returning after his little rally. So one moment. Technical difficulties. There we go. Yes. So here's poor Trump, and if you can't hear this, this is the sad violin playing, and he's carrying his MAGA hat, and he's wore out, he's tired, and reports were coming in from staffers in the White House that he was pissed about how empty it was. So Andy, getting back to your point about all of these capitalists don't care about you. They don't care about your family. They don't care about anything. So here we have the President of the United States trying to pack an auditorium who is openly frowned upon people wearing masks, says that it's a weakness, and he wants all of his folks there for him, for his own accolades, just because that's what he wants. It's a good photo op, just like the photo op that he did in D.C., where they tear gassed peaceful protesters. So,
well, apparently the White House issued a statement early saying that they had made a mistake, that they had issued masks that just happened to look like empty seats.
Okay, nice spin.
Right.
That
And and
works.
and when that fell apart, they instead went with that the minor league hockey affiliate, the Tulsa Oilers, had scheduled a practice for that evening, and they had to share their room.
Right. So let's blame it on the hockey team because seems as a good excuse as any. The Tulsa Oilers. Hmm. Shame on you, you hockey fans in Tulsa. So yeah, it's just it, there's no other way to describe it but a shit show, right? So so that
Well,
happened.
on top of everything, right? Like think about this, right? That the Orange Buffoon is clearly has no empathy for human beings, right? He is as the the leader of this, of these Republicans, shows absolutely no remorse in sending 10% of them to their deaths by exposing them all to COVID, right? So he would have been perfectly happy if there wasn't a empty seat in the place. Meanwhile, you have K-pop and TikTok teens that not only made him look absolutely horrible doing this, but think of the lives that they save, right? The number of people
Yeah,
that now
absolutely.
potentially won't get COVID because they weren't able to go to this rally.
Oh, absolutely. And you bring up a very great point. And you and I talked about this last week, the Dave Chappelle show, where, or not his show, but his recent special. And he made the point that I thought was brilliant, where he talked about the younger generation. And he said, y'all are driving and you're good drivers. And I think we see that again here with something that is hilariously funny, but you're right, so effective. How many lives were saved because they took it upon themselves to have a good time thwarting this horrific idea? Um, so yeah, I think that me as an older person in this progressive movement, I am relieved and have confidence in what the younger generation is doing. And I'm more than happy to support them. And it's part of the reason why we're doing this here. So I think that's a very valid point. Especially when you have people like we're sequestered at home. What do you do? What can I possibly do? And then you have efforts about building the National Progressive Party and education with macro and cheese and things. What can I do? What one thing can I do to help with this? And people feel powerless. Here's a great example, right? So
Exactly. One of the other things that boggles my mind, especially in an unfettered capitalist society like the United States, is you have the potential to put a huge number of people in an arena for a Trump rally, whether you think that's good or bad. And all of those people could potentially be billboards in this amount of space on their face with a Trump logo or a Trump saying or keep America great by simply creating 20,000 masks and those 20 people walking around with those masks, advertising for Trump, right? Even if you don't believe you need masks, you could take these and you could have these people would clearly walk around with them because they're advertising for their hero. Not only are you saving lives by making these twits wear them, right? You're now getting free advertising for the cost of making a few thousand masks.
you bring up a good point because you reminded me of in LA, the police there confiscated like 4 boxes full of black face masks that had "I can't breathe" written on them, for no other reason than they were personally offended by the messaging. So if we as progressives on our disorganized and frankly The George Soros checks have not been coming like they used to be. So
Mm,
we don't have that kind of funding. If we could do it, couldn't he? But you're right, that's not what he cares about. There's no creativity. He wants those people in front of him cheering him.
yes. And who cares if they, die? But we're talking about the guy that for 2 weeks took hydroxychloroquine, right? Just because he wanted, just because he thought it would be a good idea, right? Not having a clue that you now have however many 6,000 people all pointed at you, out cheering and screaming at you, sending vapors into the air. So if one person in the crowd has is asymptomatic and has COVID-19, you now have a petri in this enclosed space, right? In a room with a room with a single ventilation system that's spreading that air around to everybody over a period of an hour and a half, right?
Yeah, exactly, and that's what Dr. Dillon talked about on our network. How that spread is going around, and then the viral load, which is why doctors and nurses on the front line were getting sick and dying because they were kept getting more and more of that exposure. So absolutely, so it's just we all now have to wait for what happens in Tulsa with their COVID numbers, and then all of those people that came from out of state. Um, it's just going to be a disaster, absolute disaster. But
And the other thing that would have been helpful is if these people had, worn the masks, at least they would, have a collector's item, and other people could tell they were at this rally, and then they would know to stay away from them.
like a public service, yeah, absolutely right,
Yes.
absolutely. So, Andy, one of the other things that you brought up was Chicago. This particular headline over the weekend, which let me see if I can get this to come up properly. So here we go, Chicago. So here's the headline that you brought to my attention, and this is from the Chicago Sun-Times. 102 shot, 14 fatally over Father's Day weekend in Chicago. So, Andy, you want to take it away on this one?
Well, I know that Chicago is at least portrayed as a dangerous place, and that numbers like 3, 4 dead, 30 injured over the weekend are not, abnormal for that region. But 102 shot, 14 fatally, including a 3-year-old child and a 13-year-old young girl who were killed. Um, I don't know about you, but this to me sends up a little bit of a red flag. This is absolutely ridiculous. And if you go through this story, right, from the Chicago Sun-Times, and I'm not going to assume anything, but I'll imagine that this is, a large media outlet that is owned by a neoliberal corporation that has its own agenda, right? And that the majority of this article is basically describing the age and sex of the different 102 victims that were shot and injured or killed during these weekend attacks. However, another couple of red flags, and I would say that the vast majority of coverage on stories like this, especially in mainstream media, usually include two things predominantly. And that is one, that they are talking about who was responsible for these, and if it is in fact considered to be a group of people or if it's just random people. And the other thing that they absolutely love to talk about in these articles is the ethnicity of the victim, right? And these are suspiciously absent from most of these stories, which makes you wonder why. And I would suggest that this is not outside the realm of possibility that if we are going to give you the numbers and the ages and the sex of the people that were involved in this, but not tell you the race of the people and not tell you who the perpetrators could possibly be, then maybe we are going to hope that you jump to that conclusion on your own, especially if that information is known to authorities.
So here's why it's so intriguing. For those who aren't in and around Chicago, don't know it, Andy, you bring up a great point. Every time people, particularly on the right and in corporate media, mention Chicago and violence, automatically we assume South Chicago and Black people. And that is a learned behavior. That's a learned assumption. That is propaganda that has gone over and over and over. So right now I feel the disturbance on the right going, but statistically, no, you're cherry picking data. And that's not how it works. So when you brought this to my attention and you pointed it out, I'm not gonna lie, because my initial reaction was, oh, but for, and then I went, wait a second, 102? That is off the charts for even a bad weekend, right? So when you start to think about it, and I posted the link to the article that we're discussing today, you're absolutely right, because I'm looking at some of these neighborhoods, and these are ethnically diverse neighborhoods. Some of them have already gone through gentrification, so it's mostly white people who live there. And they didn't mention some of the ethnicity of some of the victims. They did name the victims who have Hispanic sounding last names, but the rest of them they did not. So you're right. This entire article is peppered with that corporate media dog whistle to kind of bring up the fact that, well, we have now Chicago is still raging with the Black Lives Matter protests, and rightfully so. So proud of everybody to keep this in the front lines. So what they're trying to do here is, I think you're right, connect the two. Connect. So I'm looking at this article, and they're looking at Rogers Park neighborhood and Austin and North Chicago. All of these areas. So if you look up where these places are, these are not areas that typically see this level of shootings. So what in fact is going on? And the only indication that they give is let's see, what is that? A blue Honda. A blue Honda was firing at people in the Austin neighborhood. So yeah, this entire article is suspect. Not because of what it's saying, but because of what it doesn't say. And I think you were right to look at it that way. And one of the people that we're trying to get on here to interview is a well-known activist here in Chicago, works with Jamal Green. His name is Stringer Harris. And he and Jamal went up to Minneapolis to assist with getting some justice there, and Stringer was the one who helped get a Chicago police officer, a sergeant, fired for his cover-up of an unarmed shooting of a Black man who worked as a security guard. So what is interesting to me is that here in Chicago, and I was explaining it to Andy before we got started here, it is known that the Fraternal Order of Police busses in alt-right white supremacists from Michigan and Wisconsin to hold their protests of Chicago's Black Attorney General. So not just her, but for the first time in city history, we have three prominent, strong Black women who are running Chicago, and they don't like it. And it's very well known here. They've been called out for it about all of their support from alt-right and white supremacist groups. So now we see Chicago Sun-Times. Chicago Sun-Times, what's going on? Where's the rest of the story? Where's the rest of the information here? So I'm good on you, Andy. You saw it. You don't live here, and you knew enough to kind of question what wasn't in the article.
Yeah, that's it's suspicious at best, right? Like, are we trying to control the narrative here? Trying to, because clearly that the White House has shown an aptitude for wanting to start a race, because if they can scare enough white people into thinking that Black people want to kill you, then that increases Trump's chance of winning in November, right? Right. Um, I'm just working away. We're just the normal standard fare, just trying to get back into the swing of things after my convalescence that was extended by fatigue. I'm still waiting on the blood test. But I do seem to be getting slightly better every day, and there's indications that that I may have just been about the number of medications that I was taking daily to try to fight through what I was going through with my back. And it's just a matter of not I'm coming to the understanding that I'm not in my 20s. you know so the human body doesn't bounce back as it did when you were younger. So it's just trying to get all my stuff. And the biggest issue that I'm finding that I just that through the mostly the month of May, when I was when I was injured, and then of course in Canada, the springtime is when you move from working within your house to outside of your house, and working in gardens and working on projects outside, and getting the unwinterizing the lawn tractor to cut the grass. And so I wasn't able to do any of that. So I'm so far behind the curve trying to trying to get all that stuff caught up now. I ended up that three of the vehicles in my driveway all needed oil changes at the same time. So trying to delicately lie underneath a car and change the oil. So been a matter of getting caught back up to where I normally am by mid-June. That's starting to come.
Well, the good news is, I guess, maybe with climate change, everything's moved a little bit by 3 weeks. So you're actually not behind at all. So,
No, no, it was surreal. I do recall having to walk out onto my back deck because the railing on it was the right height for me to be able to lean and have a cigarette, but having the inability to put any footwear on, either socks or shoes, and standing out in the snow.
right, exactly. So, on that note, Andy, we're going to let you get out of here so you can make your appointment. So, we'll see you back here Wednesday.
Yes.
For everyone else, tune in Wednesday, and then we have some good interviews coming up this week, and some updates coming for the National Progressive Party, and a few other key and timely suggestions for you. Also, one thing that we are participating in is Blackout Tuesday, and this is where we highlight a Black-owned, minority-owned business. Just to kind of help promote the work that they're doing, their products and services, and level the playing field. So we will be doing that, and of course we're taking suggestions. So if you know of, or you yourself are as someone who is in business, service, product, or otherwise, and want to be featured in one of our Tuesday segments, please share that information, and we will make sure that we get it posted all across our network as well. So from everyone here at Progressive Insider, this has been your Monday edition of Hair of the Dog. So have a good day and a wonderful weekend. No. I'm still on Friday. Have a good day and a wonderful week. Get
I,
back to
I'm
work.
getting I'm getting you one of those watches.
It's so true.
The day of the week.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. But on that note, have a good Monday.
Yes, that's right. Enjoy Halloween.